If you're thinking about home buying, you may have heard about an appraisal contingency, wondering what that is and when you should worry about it. Stay tuned and we'll give you an overview. So an appraisal contingency is something that's used when it's generally a seller's market and very competitive across many different buyers for the same type of home. And what that is, essentially, when you have a list price of a property at, say, $500,000, what can happen is during competitive times, people would want to make more aggressive offers. So say you make an offer for $650,000. Now that's great, that gets accepted at $650,000. The original list price was $600,000. And so what happens is as you go through the mortgage contingency process and the lender goes out, at a certain point in the process, they send out their own independent appraiser for the property, and the appraiser comes up with what they think is the market fair value of the property. So if that appraisal number comes in below what the purchase price is, say the appraiser says it's worth $625,000. Now what happens is, as part of your financing or mortgage contingency, you can say you're not able to get the mortgage that you need because they're not going to be lending on the full amount of the $650,000 that's your offer price. So at this point in time, you'd have a couple options. One is you have the ability to back out of the deal if you want to. And the second is you can go back to the sellers and we can try to negotiate and come up with an agreement of how can we come up with cover that $25,000 gap between either the seller or the buyer. Usually the seller is incentivized to help chip in and cover that because they know if they could take another offer instead of yours, they're probably going to have the same issue. So we see that this is really only an issue during hyper-competitive times when there's offers that are much greater than the list price of the property. And what the appraisal contingency is, so normally that appraisal process is contained within the financing contingency. If we add in language for an appraisal contingency, it would basically be something along the lines of buyer is willing to cover a gap of $20,000 between appraisal price and purchase price if the appraisal price is lower than the purchase price. So that's saying now is in that same exact scenario, you offered $650,000, the appraisal value came in at $625,000. We said, okay, we're going to be willing to cover as a buyer a $20,000 gap, anything more than that, and we'd have to talk about it. And so that's basically the language where you're saying as a buyer that you're willing to cover a certain gap between the appraisal price and the purchase price. And this becomes important because in an environment where there's multiple very aggressive offers that are over asking price, there's potentially going to be an appraisal issue. And if that happens, now what the sellers are looking at, they're no longer necessarily looking at the overall top number for purchase price. They're also looking at who has the greatest appraisal contingency language that's going to cover the biggest gap between appraisal price and purchase price, because that's ultimately what they're going to be ending up with. And so obviously what the sellers would look for in a perfect world is they would say, as a buyer, I'm willing to waive any gap between purchase price and appraisal price. So no matter what, I'm going to be offering you the $650,000. Otherwise, if we have language that says the buyer would cover a gap of up to $10,000 between appraisal price and purchase price. Now, if the appraisal is $625,000, if our language says that you're going to cover a gap of up to $10,000, that means that the ultimate purchase price will only be $635,000 and not the full $650,000. So this is an overview of how to use an appraisal contingency and the language in certain environments, and this is definitely an important factor to be aware of as you are making offers in a highly contested environment where the list to sold price is often over 100%. For any other questions or tips, if you're looking for more, feel free to subscribe below, and if there's any questions or comments you have in terms of examples, feel free to leave those questions below. I'd be glad to help provide more clarity as well. Thanks for listening and look forward to seeing you on the next video.